I didn't mean to fall for him. Not like this. Not so quietly that I barely noticed it happening, until it was already too late. It started on a Sunday. I was hungover, irritable, and halfway through microwaving leftover Chinese when my phone buzzed. I almost ignored it, assuming it was my mom reminding me to RSVP to some family thing. But then I saw the name Zach. That alone gave me pause. Zach wasn't the type to text out of nowhere. We weren't close. Not really. We'd known each other since freshman year. Same dorm, same social circle, but we'd never hung out one-on-one. He was one of those guys who floated in and out of rooms like he didn't quite belong to any of them. Quiet. Chill. Ridiculously attractive in that effortless, skater boy way that made people notice him even when he wasn't trying to be noticed. We'd talked a few times at parties, usually while waiting for the bathroom or standing in line for pizza. He'd always smile at me like he knew something I didn't, and then disappear before I could figure out what that was. So when his text popped up, "You home?" I wasn't sure what to make of it. I stared at it too long before replying. "Yeah, why?" 3 dots appeared. Then, "Can I come over?" I need to get out of my place. 5 minutes later, there was a knock at my door. I opened it, and there he was. Zach. Hoodie pulled tight around his face, looking like he hadn't slept. His eyes were bloodshot, and not from weed. He looked wrecked. "Hey," I said, stepping aside. "Hey," he muttered, brushing past me. He dropped onto my couch like gravity had been holding him hostage. I stood there awkwardly for a second before finally asking, "You good?" He let out a sharp breath, rubbed his hands over his face. "Nope." I waited. He didn't offer more. "You want to talk about it?" He looked up at me, and there was something raw in his expression. "Can I just sit here for a bit?" "Yeah, of course." I sat down at the other end of the couch, unsure what to do with my hands. He didn't move for a while, just stared at the muted TV like it was the only thing keeping him tethered. Eventually, he spoke. "My roommate brought someone home last night. A guy. They were loud as hell. I could hear everything." I raised an eyebrow. "Okay." Zach let out a laugh that wasn't really a laugh. It wasn't the noise. It was the fact that I couldn't stop listening. That caught me off guard. "Oh." He looked over at me then, eyes tired but sharp. "I'm not out." "Not really. Most people don't know." I nodded slowly. "You just told me." "Yeah." He leaned back into the couch, letting that sit for a minute. "I don't know why. I just needed to be somewhere I didn't have to pretend I was fine." "You picked a good place," I said quietly. "Pretending isn't exactly my specialty." That got a real smile out of him. Small, but real. We sat in silence after that. Not awkward. Just still. Like we both needed the quiet more than we needed conversation. Eventually, I got up and reheated the rest of my leftovers. We sat cross-legged on the floor eating cold lo mein out of takeout boxes, sharing a single pair of chopsticks because I couldn't find another clean set. And somehow, that was the moment everything shifted. Not in some grand cinematic way. There were no declarations, no meaningful glances across candlelight. Just Zach, sitting on my floor in his socks, licking sauce off his thumb and saying, "This is the best thing I've eaten all week." I laughed. "You must be desperate." He grinned, and then, without even looking up, he said, "I feel like I can breathe here." I didn't say anything back, because I felt it too. The next time I saw Zach was 3 days later. I was coming back from class, keys jingling, earbuds in, brain somewhere between a midterm and my grocery list, when I nearly bumped into him in the hallway. He was standing right outside my door, arms crossed, looking like he'd been debating whether to knock. "Hey," I said, pulling out an earbud. His head snapped up. "Oh, hey, I wasn't sure if you were home." "I just got back." "You okay?" He gave a sheepish shrug. Didn't really feel like being alone. I didn't even hesitate. "Come in." That became the rhythm. Every few days, he'd show up, sometimes late, sometimes with a six-pack, sometimes with nothing but the hoodie on his back and a face that looked like it had been holding too much for too long. We didn't talk about why. We didn't label it. We just were. One night, we stayed up way too late watching dumb horror movies. He kept leaning over to make sarcastic comments like, that guy's definitely about to die. Or, wow, she's making smart choices for once. At one point, I laughed so hard I choked on my drink. He thumped my back, laughing too, and for a moment, everything felt light. Then, during a slow scene in the movie, he said, "You ever wonder what it would have been like if we'd met in a different way?" I looked over. "What do you mean?" "Like, if I wasn't still figuring stuff out, if we'd met later, or earlier, or if I'd just been braver." I blinked. Braver how? He didn't answer right away, just stared at the screen, which now showed a guy being chased through a cornfield. Then, softly, "I used to think about you, back when we lived in the dorms." That knocked the wind out of me a little. "You did?" He nodded, still not looking at me. "Yeah, but I wasn't ready, not even close." I didn't know what to say. My brain was spinning too fast, so instead, I said the one thing I knew was true. "I'm glad you're here now." His eyes flicked over to me. "Yeah?" "Yeah." A beat passed. Then another. The movie kept playing, but neither of us was watching, and slowly, carefully, he shifted closer. His shoulder brushed mine. I didn't pull away. He looked down at where our arms touched, then up at me. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure. Would it freak you out if I said I wanted to know what it felt like to kiss you?" My breath caught. He wasn't smirking. He wasn't joking. He was asking. I didn't answer right away. I wasn't sure I could. Instead, I reached over, slowly, and took his hand. His fingers twitched in mine. "I don't know if it would freak me out," I said, "but I know I've thought about it too." He looked at our hands. "Yeah?" I nodded. "Yeah." But we didn't kiss. Not that night. We just sat there, hands linked, the space between us quiet but electric, and somehow that felt even more intimate. The day after the hand-holding happened, everything felt different. Not in a bad way, just heavier, more aware. We didn't talk about it when Zach showed up again 2 days later, unannounced, holding a bag of gas station snacks like it was peace offering. "Movie night?" he asked, like it was the most casual thing in the world. I nodded. "Obviously." But even as we settled into the couch, legs tangled under a shared blanket, something hung in the air between us. A question we were both afraid to ask. About halfway through the movie, he shifted. Not away. Closer. He laid his head on my shoulder, like he'd done it 1,000,000 times. And maybe, emotionally, he had. Because it felt familiar, I let my head rest lightly against his. My heart was thudding, but I didn't move. I didn't want to risk breaking the moment. Eventually, he spoke. "You ever think about how weird this is?" "What do you mean?" "This," he said, gesturing vaguely between us. "I'm not your boyfriend. You're not mine. But this feels like something." I swallowed. "Yeah, it does." He didn't pull away. "I don't know what I'm doing." "That makes two of us." We stayed like that for a while, until the movie ended and the TV went quiet. The only sound was the low hum of the fridge and the occasional car outside. And then, quietly, "Can I sleep here tonight?" "You don't have to ask." He looked up at me then. His eyes were soft but unsure. "I just don't want to mess this up." "You're not," I said. He nodded, but I could see the storm behind his eyes. Still, he stood up, stretched, and headed toward the bedroom without another word. I followed. We didn't touch, not at first. We lay on opposite sides of the bed, the silence stretched tight. Then I felt the mattress shift. His hand found my arm under the blanket. And slowly, he inched closer. By the time he was curled against my back, his breath warm on the back of my neck, I could barely breathe. "You good?" I asked. "Yeah," he murmured. "This is the only place I don't feel like I'm lying to myself." I reached back and found his hand. interlaced our fingers. Then stay. He pressed his forehead gently against the back of my neck. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like the world had stopped spinning. It became a pattern. Zach would show up with barely a text, slide into my space like it was his, and every time, I let him. Not just let, wanted him there. We didn't talk about what we were. We didn't kiss. We didn't sleep together. But he kept ending up in my bed. Sometimes we'd fall asleep facing opposite directions. No contact except for our feet brushing under the blanket. Other nights he'd be curled into me like a secret, breathing slow against my collarbone. It was everything and nothing at the same time. One Friday night, he came over earlier than usual, still in his work clothes, black jeans, a white tee, smelling faintly like some cheap cologne I'd never smelled on him before. "Long day?" I asked. He dropped his backpack by the door and flopped onto the couch. "You have no idea." I tossed him a beer and sat beside him, close, but not quite touching. He cracked it open, took a long sip, and stared ahead at nothing. Then, "My brother asked if I was seeing someone." I looked over. "What'd you say?" He shrugged. I lied, said no. That landed between us like a dropped plate. I wasn't even mad. Not exactly, just hollow. "You don't have to explain," I said, even though I wanted him to. "I didn't know what to say," he continued, his voice low. "Because I don't know what this is." I nodded. "Fair. But I think about you," he added. "All the time." My throat tightened. "Zach!" "No, let me say it," he cut in. "I don't know what I'm doing, but I know I feel something when I'm with you. Safer, calmer, like I'm not pretending." I didn't say anything at first. I just let that wash over me. Then I reached for his hand, held it like we always did. Quiet, steady. "You don't have to define it," I said. "But you don't have to hide it either." He looked at me. "I don't want to hide." "Then don't." That night, we shared the bed again, but it felt different. Closer, more honest. And just before we fell asleep, he whispered, "I want to try." "Try what?" "Us." I turned toward him in the dark. "Okay." He reached out and touched my face. Just a soft brush of his fingers against my jaw. Then, after weeks of almosts and what-ifs, he kissed me. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And it was ours. I woke up before him. The room was quiet, the kind of quiet you only get in the early hours before the city wakes. Light slipped in through the blinds, painting faint stripes across the sheets. Zach was still asleep, curled into me like it was something he'd done for years. His forehead rested against my shoulder, one arm slung low across my waist. Our legs tangled in a way that didn't feel accidental anymore. I didn't move. I didn't want to. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, I felt settled. Not in some dramatic, this is it kind of way. Just, okay. Like the noise in my head had finally shut up. Eventually, he stirred. A slow breath. A shift of his arm. His fingers flexed slightly against my side before his eyes blinked open. He looked at me. "Morning," he said, voice gravelly. "Hey." He didn't move. Just stared at me like he was still figuring out if the night before had actually happened. Then he asked, "Did I dream that?" "The kiss?" "Yeah." I shook my head slightly. "No dream." He nodded slowly. "Okay, good." Neither of us said anything for a while. Then, out of nowhere, he murmured, "I was scared it'd feel weird after." "Does it?" He paused. "No. It feels like it's always been there." That hit me harder than it should have. He sat up eventually, rubbing at his face. His shirt had twisted halfway up in the night, revealing a sliver of his lower back. I resisted the urge to reach for him. "Do you want coffee?" I asked, sitting up too. He looked over at me. "Only if you're having some." We ended up in the kitchen, both in boxers, both pretending this was normal now. The air was still charged, but lighter than before. He leaned against the counter, watching the coffee drip, and said, "So what now?" I blinked. "Now? Yeah. Are we just still pretending this is nothing?" I shook my head. I don't want to pretend. He looked relieved. Me neither. We didn't define it right then. We didn't put a label on it or make some big speech. But something shifted that morning, just like it had the night before. A wall came down, and in its place, something real began to take shape. Zach didn't leave that morning, or the next. He started showing up with groceries instead of just snacks. Stayed through full weekends. His hoodie lived on the back of my desk chair. His toothbrush ended up in my bathroom like it belonged there. We still hadn't called it anything, but it felt like something. One night, we were cooking dinner together. He was burning garlic and refusing to admit it, and he glanced over at me and said, "You're easy to be around." I smiled. That's a new one. I usually get, "You're kind of intense." He laughed. Nah, you're intense in the good way. You notice everything. You care too much. I stirred the pasta. You say that like it's a flaw. It's not. He paused, then added, I think that's why I like being here so much. You care even when I don't know how to say I need it. I didn't know what to say to that. So I didn't say anything. I just leaned over and kissed his cheek. He went quiet for a second after that, eyes on the pan, stirring absently. Then, I used to think guys like you didn't look at guys like me. I turned to him. What does that mean? He shrugged, still not looking at me. You're put together, confident. You always seemed like you knew who you were. I gave a small laugh. I faked confidence for so long I forget when it's real. Zach finally looked at me. Well, it works. We ate on the couch, bowls in our laps, feet pressed together under the coffee table. Halfway through, he shifted, leaned his head against my shoulder. It was becoming a thing. That casual kind of closeness that didn't need explanation. After we cleaned up, he pulled me onto the bed, not in a rushed way, not even with expectation, just to be close. And when we lay there in the dark, our fingers intertwined under the blanket, he whispered, You feel like home. I didn't answer. I just kissed his hand and hoped he knew what that meant. It didn't fall apart, but it did crack. Zach was quiet for 2 days. No texts, no late-night knocks, no movie night messages with crying laugh emojis. At first, I gave him space. He needed that sometimes. He'd pull back and reappear just as quickly, like nothing had happened. But on day 3, the silence got too loud. I texted, You okay? He didn't respond, so I waited another day. Then I showed up. His apartment was dim. He opened the door shirtless, hair a mess, like he hadn't slept in a while. Hey, he said. Voice flat. I stepped inside. Hey. He didn't hug me, didn't reach for me. Just turned and walked back to the couch. You been avoiding me? I asked gently. He didn't answer right away. Then, I've been trying not to ruin it. Ruin what? He looked up, eyes tired. This, us, whatever we are. I sat beside him. You haven't ruined anything. He shook his head. I get in these moods. I shut down. I push people out. Zach, I'm scared you'll stop waiting around. I reached for his hand. I'm not going anywhere. He swallowed. You say that now. I'll keep saying it. He finally looked at me. I've never had something that felt this steady. It freaks me out. I squeezed his hand. You don't have to run from it. He didn't speak, but he leaned into me. Slowly, carefully, like he was testing if I was still there. I was. Later that night, back at my place, we lay side by side in bed. I didn't ask him for anything. I just let him be there. He rolled toward me in the dark and whispered, I missed you. I missed you too. And then, so quiet, I almost didn't catch it. I think I'm falling for you. My chest clenched. I think I already have, I whispered back. He didn't say anything else. He just kissed me. And this time, it wasn't careful. It was honest. A month passed. Zach didn't disappear again. He still had bad days. Sometimes he'd get quiet, retreat into himself for a bit, but he always came back. And when he did, he came back softer, quicker to hold my hand, quicker to say, hey, I'm not okay, but I don't want to be alone. We never made a big thing of it. We didn't update our Facebook statuses or throw a label on it, but things changed in the ways that mattered. He'd text me midday just to say, thinking about you. He left a hoodie at my place, on purpose this time. He learned how I liked my coffee. I learned he always kissed the top of my shoulder in the mornings, when he thought I was still asleep. One night, we ended up at a friend's party. I hadn't expected him to come. Big crowds still made him anxious, but he showed up anyway, beer in hand, hair damp like he'd just gotten out of the shower. I watched him from across the room, laughing with someone I didn't recognize, and for a second I couldn't believe he was mine. Not in a possessive way. Just in that quiet, stunned way, when life gives you something you never thought you'd have. Later, when we were walking home, he said, I kept catching you staring. I smirked. You looked good. He bumped my shoulder with his. You looked like someone I'd want to go home with. You're already going home with me. He stopped walking. I turned. What? He didn't answer right away. Then, I want this. This? You. Us. The thing we've been dancing around. My chest tightened. I want that too. We kissed on the sidewalk, not in a desperate way, not like we were hiding, just like it was allowed now. The next morning, he made breakfast in my kitchen while I sat at the table, bleary-eyed and shirtless. He set a plate in front of me. You're not dreaming. Huh? He sat across from me. I saw the look on your face. Like this might not be real, I smiled. It feels too good to be. He leaned across the table, rested his hand over mine. It's real. Whatever this was, messy, slow, soft, it was ours, and it was just beginning.